Welcome to our Leaders in Housing Counseling call. This is Bruce Dorr-Palin from the National Housing Resource Center, and we have Matthew Goodrow on the line as well. We have a really good crowd today, so we're going to dive in, and we have our guest of honor, Sarah Jarik, head of the Office of Housing Counseling at HUD, and we're going to do a few quick updates first and go quickly to her. We have her until 20 minutes after the hour, depending on what time zone you're in, and so we'll go over the usual hour length, and we'll have opportunities for discussion as well as HUD will make a presentation. We're going to do a quick series of updates first, and then dive into the conversation. So glad everybody's on the line, and let's get going. So Matthew, quickly on federal funding.
Yep, just very quickly. So folks may know that we're currently under, I think, the fourth continuing resolution, which is funding the government at current levels through, I believe it's next Thursday, it's February 8th. The lingering question is when or if Democrats and Republicans can come to some agreement on lifting budget caps. The debate is over, the Democrats are trying to get domestic spending lifted at close to or the same as defense spending, which is what Republicans want to lift defense spending. It's been proven very difficult for them to reach an agreement. There's some talk now that they're not going to be able to reach an agreement even by when the current CR expires. So we may find ourselves still in this kind of holding pattern going forward into the next few weeks or month or so. So just stay tuned. We're hopeful that if they are able to reach an agreement, that we can go back to the drawing board with the housing counseling funding numbers and hopefully get those lifted to keep counseling at least funded at the level that it currently is of $55 million. So stay tuned. We will hopefully have more in our next call in 2 weeks.
Good, thank you. And a few quick updates. So we had a terrific call 2 weeks ago on the Housing Counselor Certification Exam. It was recorded, and you can go to our website if you missed it. And the part about the certification exam starts 15 minutes into the call. We did take the questions that people asked and sent it over to HUD so that they have a chance to look over it and hopefully inform their process. And HUD also has said they'd be happy to do a meeting or a phone call with people who've taken the test who wanted to give feedback on their experience and any suggestions that they've got. We have a couple slots still open for that call, so we have a good group of people. But if there's people if you have constructive feedback you'd like to give, shoot me an email, and we'd be happy to add you to the group. Big news is that the PHH case, which challenged the constitutionality of the director of the single director status of the CFPB, has had a court ruling. It's in the appeals level. I won't get into the technical details here. Our interest has been that it impacts RESPA and how fee-for-service payments are looked at from lenders to housing counselors. That's not the purpose around the case. It's around a form of reinsurance, but we think it could have implications on this. I think that's how lenders have looked at it as well. And so Matthew's done a write-up on this, and we'll push this out this afternoon later on and get you a copy of the court ruling as well. And this will be a topic we'll have a chance to talk about in future calls. We also are continuing to have conversations with groups around disaster recovery and the role of housing counseling, and figuring out if there's ways to fund the housing counseling work more effectively in the CDBG-DR process. And in a recent conversation we had with NeighborWorks America and RCAC and HomeSmart New York and Unidos US, one topic came up, which was the need for counseling groups to have more disaster preparedness, because things do happen, and not having your agency get taken by surprise. And so we're thinking about putting together a session on that on one of the leaders' calls, And if that's something that you've got some expertise in and would like to share, please shoot me an email about that. And on that list of shooting me emails, the other one is making another plug for Innovations in Housing Counseling. This is a really good series. If you want to elevate some innovative thing you're doing that brings in a new income stream to the organization, we're very interested, and we're looking for more of these. We'll have a few of them already lined up this year, but we have room for others if you've got that. And please, we're anxious to get these into the system because they're very well received. And one last piece is that we're doing our next event, big event. We talked about the one in Chicago. Next one's coming up with Tampa Bay area, and the groups are terrific and deeply involved. We're very interested in trying to leverage social media more effectively. And so if you've got a dazzling expert in Facebook, we're interested in talking to that person and learning from them. We'll certainly share all the learnings we have from this event, just as the way we did from Chicago. And we're definitely expanding what we're doing and learning from the local groups, but also going to try some new things. So hopefully this will all be useful to everyone. But if you've got somebody on your staff who's got tremendous experience in the social media area that you think might be helpful to us, we'd love to talk to them right now because we're designing the plan. Okay, well, thanks everybody, and let's move on quickly to the most important topic here. So we have Sarah Jarik, and hopefully everybody's familiar with Sarah's terrific work she's been doing at HUD and in our housing counseling community before that. And Sarah, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Bruce, and thanks to everybody on the call today. I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you all and learn from you, and look forward to your questions throughout. I'll take questions periodically from Matthew, so I will be doing this in chunks. But before I dive in and go to the discussion items, I do want to thank Bruce, Matthew, and the members of the National Housing Resource Center for all of your work, but in particular, a couple weeks ago, a few of you came in and met with our General Deputy Assistant Secretary, Dana Wade, our Senior Housing Advisor to the Secretary, Adolfo Marzal, and really made a very good case about the people you see, what their needs are, and the value you bring. And so I just want to thank you for the educational commitment you provide to educating the new leadership here at HUD. Next slide, please. Today I'm going to cover a couple things. I'm going to just give you some updates about the program. I will focus on disaster relief and recovery, as Bruce teed up earlier. Financial sustainability is always a big issue, and I'll let you know how we're thinking about that. I want to spend some time on resources we have available that, I'll be frank, I think are underused on our website because I'm not sure people know they're there. So we're going to navigate together, and I'll show you some of the things that HUD has made available that might help your work. And finally, I will spend a little time on updates around housing counselor certification, as well as taking any questions you have. So let's dive right into updates, and you can skip ahead to the update part. Next slide. There we go. So we keep track based on the numbers you report to us of how many people have been helped through the housing counseling program, and total activity for through July of 2017 is about 880,000 people served, mostly in one-on-one counseling, but a third in group education. All different kinds of counseling is offered, and we've continued to see a shift from mortgage default counseling, which is at about 22% now. At a high, it was, I think, 41% of all activity. And that's shifting to pre-purchase and rental, which have been increasing somewhat. Our numbers lag because you report to us in a way that, especially for the fourth quarter, is somewhat delayed. So we expect to have final fourth quarter numbers out in the next couple weeks. And I guess now is a good, well, let me go to the next slide and then I'll make another comment. So you've started reporting to us the impacts you've had on counseling, and we report those to Congress and to stakeholders and to our leadership. And you've helped 256,000 households develop a sustainable budget. That doesn't mean it's a positive budget in all cases, but it's a budget that is objective to the family and can guide them on their spending decisions. You've delivered fair housing information, improved the financial capacity of families, perhaps by increasing their savings or their credit scores, and helped nearly 200,000 households gain access to resources to help their housing situation. That might be legal services, that might be an emergency assistance fund, etc. The impact is really important, and I know some of the systems make it hard to report. Very recently, our system was down on activity reporting for a couple weeks, and we had a pretty major glitch that we were able to fix. As of Monday, you are now able to upload your first quarter 2018 data, and we have extended the deadline for reporting to us to February 15th in recognition of the fact that the system was down. Reporting's a pain in the neck. I know a lot of you spend a lot of time doing it. It is the impact that you have, and it tells your story for the investment the taxpayers make in this program. So I want to thank you for your efforts to report timely and accurately. Next slide, please. Can you go to the next? Oh, there we go. So I'm going to shift gears a little to disaster assistance, and then at the end of some disaster discussion, I'll pause for a minute for questions. I'm going to talk first about a team we've created within my office called the Disaster Assistance Response Team. Next slide, please. And DART, which is one of my, I can't have favorite teams. We have a lot of different teams within HUD, but this one is very special in part because the staff insisted on creating this team and doing this activity at a time when I unwisely said, do we really need to do this? We have a lot of other stuff on our plate. And it was because of the initiative of some people in my office that we actually have a very robust program to support housing counseling agencies in preparing for, preventing, and then responding to disasters. It was a good thing that the DART team was smarter than me, because over the disasters in the summer, they just, wiped out whole regions, as you know, but also affected more than 250 housing counseling agencies who were either directly impacted or whose clients were impacted. The team was created after Hurricane Sandy, and we do reach out to assess what the impact is. And in the case of Maria in particular, I was able to report very quickly to the Deputy Secretary about the impact of the storm on housing counseling agencies and also on the clients they serve. And that kind of information is used by leadership to direct FEMA resources and longer-term disaster planning. We also try to provide training and resources. I'll talk a little more about that. And one of the things that is very important to us, and a lesson learned after Sandy, was that number of jurisdictions receiving disaster assistance funding, what Bruce called CDBG-DR funding, that's appropriated after disasters by Congress, didn't know the value of housing counseling in disaster recovery, didn't use CDBG-DR money in their planning for housing counseling, and housing counselors didn't really know who to reach out to or how to be part of the solution. And so we created a program guide that's to show the value of housing counseling in a disaster recovery scenario for funders, including jurisdictions receiving CDBG-DR. That program guide, by the way, and I'll show you where it is, makes a very good case for the value of housing counseling in general if you're looking for language for some of your funders or potential funders. But it also shows the particular importance of housing counseling in disaster relief. Next slide, please. So when you are dealing with housing counseling after a disaster, next slide, the housing counselors play a critical role in helping the communities. And for those of you who've done it or been part of this, you know that counseling post-disaster is very different. And I just want to highlight here a couple of the areas that are different. The engagement can be very long-term because some of the decisions and resources are very slow. You need expertise in homeowners insurance and unique loss mitigation solutions that are developed specifically for disasters. By the way, you've got unique scams that come up as well that counselors can be well situated to help consumers avoid. Learning the networks and assisting clients who are in a lot of distress can be a very important key. And then the decision on whether clients should remain or rebuild or even relocate is a very tough one for clients to work through and requires a special kind of assistance. So HUD has been working with our training partners and others to make sure that you receive and have access to training on counseling in a disaster recovery context. And we're very, very proud of the large number of counselors that have attended these trainings. As Bruce mentioned earlier, an important part of disaster recovery is an emergency preparedness plan. Sometimes these are called COOP plans, continuity of operations plans. And they are what you use when the lights go out and you're suddenly not able to operate. And it's planning for that event. I'll give you a hypothetical. Suppose your funder, say Congress, decides that they're not going to give you any money and you have to shut down your program suddenly. A COOP plan helps by letting you have with you the phone numbers of your staff so that if people had planned to travel and suddenly they can't, you're able to reach them or you know where they are. So an emergency preparedness plan can be good for all kinds of situations, and we certainly believe that and have seen the importance of agencies having a plan themselves. We will be providing training and connecting with organizations like NHRC to make their trainings available so that your organization is able to function throughout a disaster, which the odds are is likely to come regardless of where you live or what kind of physical conditions surround you. So the next slide, please. We have a number of disaster recovery resources on our website, and our main website for resources is hudexchange.info. And you'll see there a disaster recovery toolkit. It includes flyers like the one on the slide in 12 languages, and it includes links to our training and other resources. Next slide, please. So this deck that will be available to you after the call includes links, and I think these are active. Matthew will get you the active links if not. The program guide I mentioned earlier, the posters, FHA policies on disaster relief, and CDBG-DR toolkits, and other information. So we put a wealth of information up there. Again, I want to thank the HUD DART team, Disaster Assistance Recovery Team, for its hard work. They've really done a great job, but you can help us because those of you who've gone through this can tell us what you need, and we like to keep responding. So with that, I think I'm going to pause here perhaps and just check in with Matthew and see if there are any questions at this point on the stuff I've covered so far.
Yeah, and there's some kind of general questions that I'll just hold until the end, but there are a few going back to the first slide that you had on the breakdown of services. Mm-hmm. So someone asked, they said 22% for, I think that they read the slide as saying that 22% was for homelessness counseling and were a little surprised by that and just wanted to make sure that that was correct and that it wasn't mortgage delinquency and default.
Yeah, that is incorrect. So 22% is not homelessness. Homelessness counseling tends to be around 1 or 2% of all counseling. And I just visited an agency that does quite a bit of it, and it's very, very impressive work, but it's not a very large percentage at all. Kind of the problem with colored pie charts is being able to match the category with the color, but the 22% I believe was mortgage delinquency and default.
Great. And someone else wanted to just clarify if those numbers were for a quarter or for the year to date.
They were year to date through the third quarter of 2017. So they went from October 1st, 2016 to June 30th, 2017.
Okay. And one other question just came in that I think is relevant here is there a category for disaster recovery or disaster relief?
What an interesting question. I was just asked that here at HUD. We do not have a category for reporting disaster relief counseling yet. As you may know, we're very reluctant to change reporting because each change involves changing every system that talks to HUD and changing the reporting that you do on a client-by-client basis. So we have not introduced any new categories for more than a couple years. The outcomes reporting was the most recent change we made. We are considering new categories, and we will come out to you and have that discussion with counselors to see what they think, and give plenty of lead time before we make any changes. But disaster relief counseling is something that we're thinking about tracking separately, but right now we don't. And so you will report it under rental counseling if it's a renter, under homeowner counseling if it's a homeowner, under homeowner foreclosure prevention if it's a mortgage default issue. It can fall in a number of different areas, and so the disaster reporting winds up getting fragmented into the existing categories.
Great. As I said, there's some more kind of general questions that I'll just hold till the end.
Okay. Well, then let's continue. On the next topic I wanted to talk about is program sustainability, and by this we mean keeping enough money in the organization that you can pay your staff. And so next slide, I wanted to share, first of all, we're very, very aware of the challenges here with the National Foreclosure Mitigation Counseling funding being zeroed out, with other funding sources declining, and we are very concerned about that. We also know that counseling agencies are wonderful at leveraging scarce federal dollars with private dollars. So our approach has been pretty broad and creative. We've looked for opportunities to promote policies that promote housing counseling so that other partners see the value. We've wanted to increase awareness and visibility, encourage partnerships, and provide tools. Let me just talk a little bit more about each of these. So I know I've said to this group before, and you're aware, that the Uniform Residential Loan Application is now asking questions of all borrowers, potential borrowers, whether they have received counseling or education, and from whom. That's a new question that will be baked into lender systems as they collect the data from the Uniform Residential Loan Application. Doing that alone is going to increase the awareness of counseling for consumers, lenders, and other partners, and I'm looking forward to feedback on just the fact that that question is being asked. How does that affect the agencies, or do they see any impact? Another initiative that we're working on now is to make sure that the data points that you report to us are compliant with MSMO, which is spelled out on the slide. And the reason that's important, even though this is totally geeky and arcane, is that when you have data specifications, then any system can collect and report the data because it has a common industry definition of what that data point is. So MSMO is the mortgage industry, basically the data standards organization, and they are mapping all of the 9902, the HUD reporting data points into the mortgage industry mapping system so that lenders, to cut to the chase, can collect information in their loan systems about housing counseling, and then one of the holy grails is match it to their loans if they like, and know which agency did the counseling if it's reported that way. So this is arcane in the sense that it just gives lenders the opportunity to collect and input the same information that you do on your 9902, but it creates a uniform standard so that any system that asks, did you do pre-purchase counseling, did you have a client do that, they're going to ask with the same definitions that HUD uses. So we've got standard definitions across the private sector and across government. And I hope we can get a universal adoption that the way you report on the 9902 should be the way that every funder accepts the reporting. In addition to just trying to bake counseling more into the mortgage process, and those were two examples, we're doing a lot to try to increase the awareness and visibility of counseling. The events that you're doing with Bruce in Chicago and Tampa are wonderful, and Bruce and Matthew have been sharing the lessons learned from those events, and we want to also use those lessons learned in tools that we provide and training we provide to help you tell your story to stakeholders. So that's an avenue that you'll see more of in the coming year. We are reinforcing partnerships with different entities, again, to show the value of counseling. Sometimes those partnerships take a long time to develop, and sometimes it's, oh yes, I just forgot you were there kind of thing. So I've been meeting with some bank regulators recently and look forward to other meetings with stakeholders to just remind them of the value of counseling. And I'm not focusing on it in this talk, but the research that shows the effectiveness of counseling. And we are working on toolkits to show different models of raising funds to support housing counseling. We have a project in the works to survey different ways that agencies have funded their counseling program and identifying a few that may be good models. So an example might be how to charge a fee to a client for counseling if you've never done that before. What are the pros and cons? What's been the experience of agencies that have done that? So it's a little, some examples of things you might consider doing if there are funding sources that you haven't tapped yet. And I believe the research on that has gone to something over 30 different possible funding sources. So it'll be a nice set of ideas to consider if you're looking for additional funding. I think at this point, let's go ahead and I want to take a deeper dive into the public awareness piece. And in doing this, I'd like to just show you a little bit more what is on HUD Exchange, our website, that might be of use to you. So if you could go to the next slide on public awareness and resources we have for you, and then the next slide again. I think most of you are familiar with the Beat the Odds poster we produced and sent to you all, and you can download it. It's on our website, and I'm going to show you exactly where. We have put on the website not just this poster, we put our toolkits. We have some short videos about the value of counseling for consumers and other material. Anything on our website you are free to use as public use. That's why we do it. And so you can download the video, put it on your own website. You can make more copies of the poster, etc. We are happy to make those available to you and hope they add value to you. If there are things you don't see that you'd like to see, let us know that too. The little bullet down there that says research name change, and I do want to talk about that here. It's something we've just begun, well, it's kind of just begun. It's been talked about for a long time with this organization, NHRC, and many others. Some of our research on, why is housing counseling a secret, and how can we make it more, how can we get consumers to choose to do housing counseling? And one of the barriers is that the name of housing counseling or housing counselor has negative connotations for some people. They associate it with marriage counseling, drug counseling. They think it's a problem that needs fixing, and they may not be identifying themselves with the problem. Some people don't feel it's an accurate description of what takes place. Others love the name. They've invested a lot in housing counseling name. It does have a certain amount of name recognition, and they would prefer not to see any difference. So we are doing a little project to research whether to change the name and what's involved. By the way, HUD doesn't mandate that you use the name housing counseling. And if we find a name change, we may not mandate that you change your name. But what we do is invest in the materials and resources, and the name of our program, certainly, and how we refer to it right now is housing counseling. So we kicked this off with a few focus groups in December and got wonderful participation and feedback. We will be doing more throughout the year, not just with counselors, but also with clients, lenders, real estate agents, landlords, other stakeholders, and pulling together ideas, and then certainly getting input into what we decide if we decide to change. So we will keep you posted on that. It is going to, there's a lot to it. It's complicated. There are legal issues, statutory issues, and other issues. Having said that, it seems like as we're going through certification, we're creating a higher bar of professionalism. It seems like now's the time to think about a name change if we're going to do it. So I wanted you to know that we're thinking about that, and there will be more to come. Next slide, please. So where are all these resources? If you go to hudexchange.info and you scroll to find the housing counseling program, this graphic will appear on our landing page, and there is an outreach and page and a research and studies page. The outreach page has our resource materials, fact sheets, videos, the posters. Our most recent publication is the Homeowner's Guide to Success, which your members were very helpful with, what homeowners should know about the loss mitigation process now that they're making home affordable has sunset. So that can be downloaded there, and it's a very nice guide for homeowners, by the way, in simple language about what they can expect if they feel like they won't be able to pay their mortgage. Next slide, please. Section, oops, yes, back one. There we go. Mentioned the disaster posters before. This is all in the housing counseling outreach section. And if you look below, you'll see a section on flyers, posters, fact sheets, and videos. And things like the disaster recovery posters can be found there. You have your choice of how to print them, what language, what size, and those are all posted on our webpage now. Next slide. We have a lot of other materials, and including fact sheets on almost every aspect of counseling. So if you're a reverse mortgage counselor or you have that program, we have flyers on reverse mortgage counseling, again, in more than one language and in PDFs that you can download. And these are directed to consumers who may not know what it is or what to expect, or may not be aware of the services you provide. Right now, they are not set up to be easily co-branded. And that's something that we'd like to have so that HUD-approved agencies can add their information on them if they're, if you decide to disseminate them. But for right now, they're really meant to be in your office rather than broadly distributed with your agency's name on them. But we are working on that. Next slide, please. So the other tool that I wanted to make available to you, make sure you knew was there, were toolkits. And we've been developing toolkits for agencies on a number of topics. including disaster recovery, foreclosure prevention, and other types of agency capacity building. You'll see a wide variety that range from compliance-focused toolkits to other things. And again, we hope you find them helpful, and you should give us comments. And we have gotten comments from you, and we continue to improve some of the toolkits based on that. We include other resources as well, both within the program and outside of it. So the FHA HAMP program, which is still in effect, we have a link to because it's commonly used by counselors, and the work of our Federal Advisory Committee, the meeting minutes, et cetera, and materials are on the website as well under Housing Counseling Resources. Next slide, please. There are specific toolkits, and you can scroll down to decide the type you want, including toolkits around outreach and other topics. And so I do hope you spend a little time looking on our website if you haven't before and see what would be helpful to you. We are constantly updating them, and as I've, you may have noticed recently, for example, we recently did a refresh on the design of our Bridge newsletter, again, based on your feedback, which we really appreciate. So these are always works in progress, and our goal is to make sure they add value to your program. I think with that, before I go to Housing Counselor Certification, let me pause again and see if there are questions or comments on what I've covered so far.
Yeah, so going back to the potential name change for counseling, someone just asked if you were able to provide any insights into the focus group that you did, and specifically if there were any potential replacements that you were able to share from that conversation.
I don't have like a list of options yet. I will say that the focus groups, we don't have an official write-up yet. We're still gathering the data. I'll just say very anecdotally that the focus groups were incredibly enthusiastic, engaged, and cared a lot about the topic. So the counseling world was very well represented by the people, and I think we had a total of 60 people participate in focus groups in December. The type of name that comes up is something like housing advisor or home advisor, or things along that nature. But there have been a number, and I don't think we're ready to kind of hone in on a couple to put out there yet. I think we're still in the fact-finding phase.
Great. That's all for now. And I'll just say we just remind folks that you can ask questions for Sarah using the question box, and we will keep answering them as we go.
So Housing Counselor Certification, I know there's lots and lots of interest questions, and we've certainly been encouraging you to take the test sooner rather than later and become certified. And you know that taking the test is not all there is to becoming certified. Your agency also has to confirm that you work for them in the HUD system. So let me give you a couple updates right now. I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that I've heard a lot, but I'm sure you have more. So next slide. So just as a reminder, counselor certification is a result of a statute change that says that all housing counseling required under or provided in connection with any program administered by HUD should be provided only by organizations and counselors certified by the Secretary. So that means that housing counseling provided by CDBG subrecipient that's doing a housing counseling program will have to provide it through a certified counselor working for a HUD-approved counseling agency. The effective date of August 1st, 2020. A certified counselor has two parts. They have to pass an examination, and the topics are specified by statute, and they also have to work for a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. So this is a sea change in the industry. I am thrilled with the counselors kind of embracing and stepping up to the challenge and appreciating the value that this will bring to their profession and to the clients. Having said that, it's a hard thing for us to roll out. It's a very hard thing to deal with getting ready for as organizations, running active programs, and as individual counselors. So we really appreciate your commitment to making this succeed. Next slide. A number of programs are affected. So all of you who are already HUD-approved housing counseling agencies are affected by this rule. But as I mentioned, there is also housing counseling that takes place through CDBG funding, family self-sufficiency programs, what used to be called Section 8 to home ownership. I guess it's Housing Choice Voucher home ownership option. And the home program also has housing counseling that will have to be done by certified counselors at the time of the final rule. So we expect a lot of changes, but we do try to keep the impact narrow to what Congress intended. And the goal is really to make sure that housing counseling that includes an intake and a financial assessment and the full scope of what we do is going to be delivered only by certified counselors working for a HUD-approved agency. Next slide. That does mean that there are partnership opportunities for agencies that are not currently delivering counseling that meets this standard. And to the extent in your jurisdiction, there are agencies that receive CDBG money, use it for housing counseling, and are not HUD approved, there may be an opportunity to provide those services on their behalf through a partnership agreement or be funded to provide the counseling directly. So we appreciate your leads if there are agencies or programs in your area that need educating about this rule and how it might affect them. We're happy to do that. And we've reached out to our colleagues at HUD in CPD, running the CDBG program, home program, and public housing programs to make sure that people are aware of these requirements. I think most of you who are in the HUD housing counseling program already are well aware of the requirements, but we are concerned that there are folks running programs that are not. The next slide, I have a few tips that we've learned just from hearing from you that I wanted to share. One is to, before you start to take the exam yourself, make sure you test the equipment prior to even scheduling the exam. Make sure that your webcam meets the requirements, that you're able to access the test through the firewall, that your computer doesn't block it. And we have other tips on our testing website, which is hudhousingcounselors.com. There is a cancellation policy because the test does involve a fee. Please read it, and please understand that if you cancel, there may be a fee charged, even if you're unable to take the exam. We are planning an update of the exam, and the update is needed primarily if we see that we have a question or issue that needs improving, but more commonly it's because something in the field has changed. So where last year, for example, there may have been questions about the Making Home Affordable program when that program is no longer relevant and there are different kinds of loss mitigation requirements, we will need to update the examination and study guide and training to reflect that. Our goal is to update twice a year. Our goal is to give you plenty of warning for the update so that you know what the exam you're studying for is going to be the exam you'll take. To date, the updates have been, I would call, fairly minor and discrete, so most of your studying should be good regardless of update, but we don't want it to be a surprise to you that there may be some changes in the exam from time to time. Next slide, please. So I'm just repeating here again the websites that we commonly use, HUD Exchange, our testing website, and as always, our email address. We actually get a couple hundred queries in our email box every month. We have another wonderful team that sorts those out, and we try to get you an accurate answer in a prompt manner. So your feedback's very important to us, and we appreciate the dialogue. And with that, I will pause and take any questions that you want to throw at me.
Great. Did you want to start with any questions, Bruce, or go straight to?
Sure. One, I know a question that's on people's minds is, what's the status of the current year NOFA?
Bruce always starts with the easy question. The NOFA is for, so I think you all know I'm not allowed to predict when the NOFA will come out. I am not allowed to tell you the terms of the NOFA at all, and I have to state that now. I will say that you're aware, and you mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that we are in a continuing resolution situation. We do not make awards if we don't have a budget to make awards from. In past years, though, we have issued the NOFA even before a final budget is adopted, and we've issued the NOFA subject to appropriated funding. So generally in the past, our goal has been to issue a NOFA whether or not there's a full budget in place, and then to make awards once the full budget occurs. The last few years, we have issued the NOFA roughly in the January, February, March timeframe, and I can't say whether it will be the same again, but I guess I can say that there isn't reason to expect change there either.
Okay, so Matthew, why don't you go to the questions on the...
Great, and they just started pouring in, but we'll go back to some of the ones that folks asked earlier to start. Are you all still discussing with SBA, the Small Business Administration, about coordinating services to underserved communities?
I would like to hear more about that.
And I'm sorry, I should have said that was about HUD generally, so it may not be that your office. That's about HUD generally. Sorry.
I would like to hear more about that. So if I will look into what HUD is still doing. I don't know the answer, is obvious, but I'm very interested in that and would like to get more information on it.
Great. And I think this is, in the context of the 9902 reporting. Someone said they manually input info into HCS a few weeks ago. So they were directed by someone at Office of Housing Counseling to do so. They're asking if they need to go back and resubmit that information.
They should not need to resubmit that information, but they can go to they can confirm that with their point of contact and make sure the information uploaded correctly, and they should be able to check it as well. But they should not be able to. They should not have to report if they've done a manual input.
Great. Somebody asked what outcomes you all are looking at to measure that financial capability is improving.
I don't. Let me see. I don't have the guidance in front of me. So we have an HCS desk guide that provides the definitions for each of the outcomes. And we need to do more training, and we plan to do more training on that because I think there's a really wide range of counselors maybe being a little conservative on what they report. But I know, for example, that one outcome that gets reported there is if the counselor is aware that the client's credit score has improved over the time of counseling, or if they are aware that the client has saved more towards a down payment or an emergency fund. So the financial capability measures there are around financial capacity and usually reducing debt, improving credit, increased savings, or reducing expenses would be what would be looked for there. And it's spelled out in our desk guide.
Great. Someone asked when the revised desk guide for 9902 reporting will be available.
That's a related question, isn't it? I don't know the when answer to that. It will certainly be posted on our HUD Exchange website, and we do plan to do training around that as well. So stay tuned for that. If I do get a specific date or a better date on that, I will share that with Bruce and Matthew to share with you.
Great. a number of exam questions. Someone asked if you're able to share the number of folks who have taken the exam and passed the exam so far.
Yeah, that's a popular question, and I'm getting some feedback on the phone. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I can't share that information right now because we haven't had a critical mass of people take the examination. When we get enough that we can conclude something from the pass rate, we will share that, but we don't have enough yet. So we're waiting. We're actually encouraging people to take the exam so that we can make some tweaks if we need to. But right now we can't actually improve the exam until we have more people. And I'm talking about more people in the hundreds. It's not like, you know, we have 20 and we need 30. We need several hundred people to have taken the exam, and we're not quite there yet.
Great. And I'm also getting that feedback. I'm honestly not sure where that's coming from, but hopefully it won't persist. Someone asked about the definition of working for an agency, and this is in the context of the certification exam. They asked about if it needs to be 40 hours, what about contractors? Could you just talk a little bit more about who needs to be taking the exam?
Sure. And this is a good point that my team wants me to do a plug for going to HUD Exchange and looking at certification FAQs, frequently asked questions. We have them on our HUD Exchange website. We also have specific ones on the HUD housingcounselors.com website, and this is one of them. A certified counselor has to work for a HUD-approved agency, and the HUD-approved agency has to go in and certify the counselor. So I again emphasize that passing the test is not enough. You need to have somebody who's approved to operate the system be trained to go in and validate. The definition of working for an agency is fairly broad. We want to know that the agency has control over the quality of work, but the definition does include volunteers, part-time people, folks in less than a 40-hour-a-week salaried employee or other than that are included, as well as the full-time employees. The goal there is to say that they are essentially under the supervisory control of the agency. And so if the quality of the work is poor, or if the counseling is being done, it's being done in the name of the agency, and the agency stands behind the work of that person. So that's spelled out more specifically in the FAQs, but I think you'll see it's a pretty broad definition.
And what about contractors? Are they included?
That's an interesting and important question. Housing counseling agencies are not permitted to subcontract out counseling. And that by that we mean that you can't employ another agency by a contract to do the counseling for you. We want to know that the agency we're standing behind is the agency doing the counseling. But there are contract employees or temp employees who may be doing the counseling, and sometimes those are called contractors. So they don't necessarily have to be on payroll. So I'm making a funny distinction because the word contract can be used in different ways. And I would say you cannot subcontract out counseling, but you may hire a temp employee or a term employee or a contractor, an individual doing the service, but they are still employed by your agency. Let's say if you have questions about this after looking at the FAQs, do send a question in to us, and we'll try to clarify our answers if our answers aren't clear already.
Great. This is somewhat related to the last point you made. Is there an email address or contact at HUD to send information on errors, mistakes, or conflicts in the exam training modules, or I suppose also, you know, questions and that kind of thing?
Absolutely, and we know there are, and we really thank the people who have done that already. Our email address is housing.counseling@hud.gov, And if you put in the subject line, even something like errors in certification exam, it will make sure it gets to the right team.
Great. Is there somewhere where folks can find a list of exam locations?
That should be at hudhousingcounselors.com. And if it's not, we will give further information to Bruce and Matthew to distribute.
Great. Somebody asked if they said so their NeighborWorks certification is no longer going to be valid. Could you just talk a little bit about how the HUD certification is going to interact with other certifications folks may have?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. We don't view the HUD certification as preempting other certifications. And in fact, the way I think of it, and this is informal, is that the HUD certification is going to be the baseline kind of bachelor's degree for housing counselors. Different forms of certification, including national industry standards, NeighborWorks programs of curricula, and different regional. Some states have their own certification. Those will be on top of the HUD certification. We would like to meet with some of those certifying entities to make sure we're coordinating. For example, some states do a certification and want counselors to pass a test. We'd like to work with those jurisdictions to make sure we're not double testing unnecessarily. Unfortunately, we can't change what we test on because we are mandated by Congress. But to the extent that we can coordinate so that the additional certification is kind of a value add without duplicating what we do already, that will be, I think, good for everyone. But the short answer is we value the different certifications. We think they're there for different purposes, and we do not view the HUD certification as replacing other ways that counselors can show their expertise.
Great. Somebody asked if a housing authority is counseling tenants. Will those folks, the people providing that counseling, need to be HUD certified?
It depends on the situation, and we would really encourage them to get in touch with us sooner rather than later. If they're doing it as counseling in the course of the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, for example, there is a very real chance that they may need to become a HUD-approved entity, and their counselors may need to become certified, or they may need to work with a HUD-approved entity to deliver that service. But each case may be a little different, and we are happy to work with them to figure out what's best for their program.
Great. I did not understand this, and I hope that you will. Someone said that they have an FHA connection for reverse mortgage. Will they need a new connection for housing counseling certification, or will that FHA connection suffice, I guess?
I do understand that question.
Okay.
FHA Connection is the name of the system that tracks certification for us. It's FHA Connection. It was built on an FHA system, and it's actually using the system that we use for reverse mortgage certification. FHA as a program is not related to housing counselor certification except the name of the system we're using. So when a counselor wants to become certified, again, reverse mortgage counselors have had to deal with this all along. The information that they've passed the test gets transmitted to FHA Connection, and then a person at the agency who is an approver can go in and say this person works for my agency, and that's how the certification takes place. So this is how it happens today for reverse mortgages. It's how it will happen, and it's starting to happen for all certification. The question, as I interpret it, is if you are certified as a reverse mortgage counselor, you will have to get an additional certification that you have passed the housing counselor exam. And well, I don't think it's unfortunate, but reverse mortgage counselors will have to take and pass 2 tests, and they will have to be certified twice in order to be both a certified counselor and a certified reverse mortgage counselor. If folks on the phone or elsewhere have ideas on how we can streamline that, I am happy to listen to that. But in our initial implementation, at least, we're doing it as 2 separate certifications.
Great. I think you covered this, but maybe just quickly, when you talked about there being changes made to the exam, will those then be reflected in the pre-test materials?
Yes, they will. We will update the pre-test materials or the practice materials, and we will also share the information with our training partners so that they can update their materials as well. And I do want to give a shout out for the great job our training grantees are doing in putting out materials for preparing for the test and helping people get ready. In addition to the work that's being done by the trade associations and others to make materials available as well. But we will try to be very transparent about changes to the exam, the areas that are being changed, so that the training materials and the practice exam will be changed at the same time.
Great. This is just a comment that you may, I don't know if you want to comment back on. The National Industry Standards for Homeownership Education and Counseling currently does not recognize the HUD exam.
Okay, that's an interesting comment, and I will, you know, I think our goal would be to be coordinated and clear. I'm not sure what it means to not recognize it, but it's an interesting comment, and I will chew on that.
Okay, and I'm not sure if one of your previous answers covered this or not, but what is the system that agencies will use to validate that a counselor is employed with them?
It's called FHA Connection, and we have given, again, there are resources available on the website on how to validate that a counselor works for you in FHA Connection. And there are a number of bits to it, so I don't want to oversimplify it here, but we have done training on this that is archived in our training webinar archives, and it's not terribly complicated, but you want to get it right. We need to validate somebody can come into this federal system at FHA Connection and say, yes, this person is employed by a HUD-approved agency. So that's the process that takes place.
Okay. There have been a number of questions that have kind of come after the discussion of contract employees.
Mm-hmm.
Can you work for more than one agency at a time if you were a term employee?
Yes, and they do. We have a number of counselors who work for more than one agency. That is fine, but again, you have to be very clear which agency is responsible for your work at which time. And in certification, I have to check the answer to that. I believe both agencies will have to certify the employment for the counseling work to be valid at both locations.
All right. This person asked, can we contract counselors 1099 as long as they work with the agency? Can you further explain?
I think that I'm going to give a simple answer, but I'm really going to refer questions first to our FAQs that are published on hudexchange.info. And then if there are further questions, ask you to shoot us an email with your specific situation. Generally, a term or contract employee that's getting a 1099 would be fine in terms of the exercising control over their work and being able to certify them as working for the agency for certification purposes.
Great, thank you. I'm going to switch gears. There's still plenty of certification questions, but and I'll also just let folks know we have about 15 minutes left with Sarah. We may not be able to get to all of the questions, but we will certainly share them with HUD. Okay, so somebody asked, kind of big picture, are there any updates or strategic direction to share from Secretary Carson?
Oh, well, yes, there are. The Secretary has put out a strategic plan for HUD for comment. I believe National Housing Resource Center and Coalition for HUD Intermediaries have started gathering comments or have actually commented. And so our strategic direction in terms of a strategic plan is still in draft form, but I would encourage you to look at it and make comments if you feel, in positive or negative or constructive would be fine. You certainly know that there are some priorities in terms of the housing counseling program specifically. I would call out reducing regulatory burden, and we are certainly going through a scrub of our handbook and rules to look at where we can make reduce burden without increasing risk. We will publish for comment any ideas we come up with and look forward to that dialogue with you. And many of you have submitted suggestions already that are certainly under consideration. A second priority I would name, which is more informal, but I think worth calling out, is oversight in general. The leadership here is very interested in how we oversee organizations and how we minimize risk to the federal government in terms of the use of federal funds and efficient program delivery and quality program delivery. And so we are continuing our program reviews. I'm doing a couple more next week actually, and we meet with you and we review compliance with the grant agreement, compliance with our standards and rules and regulations. I find from my seat, and I've conveyed this to my leadership, that I find our program is very high quality and very low risk. We do not recapture a lot of funds. You spend them well. You spend them quickly for the most part, and which is important. And the quality of services you deliver is very high, as evidenced both by our reviews and also by the few number of complaints we receive. Having said that, there are problems that come up that are very serious and that can hurt the program as a whole. For example, if a person is claiming to be an employee and delivering counseling, say in foreclosure prevention, and charging for it, and then essentially scamming clients in the name of an agency, or an actual employee doing that, or misusing funds. Those are serious issues that we work with the Inspector General with, the Department of Justice or criminal justice authorities, and we take action, including terminating the agency. I mentioned that because you can never take low risk for granted. And while our reviews are time-consuming for the agency and for us, our grant process is certainly time-consuming. I think that all that time does result in a very low likelihood of misuse, risk, or fraud, but that risk is still there, and we do want to attend to it. So our focus is really looking at that oversight this year and making sure that we're reaching and looking at a large number of the agencies that we're expected to. Again, a last big picture item I want to mention, I think we've shared with you before, is, and this combines both of those, both the reducing burden and the oversight. We are looking at ways to automate our oversight and your reporting to reduce time. We have a pretty big project going on here to automate a lot of our processes and to make it addressable to you, not in paper and not in Excel form, but just through computer keystrokes, where both you and us can see and report much more easily and with more ability to analyze what you're reporting or act on it. So that project is probably going to start to be beta tested this year. It'll mostly initially affect our internal systems and the way we do things, but we hope quickly to have some parts of it that will be addressable to you. We're still built on a very old platform that's very rickety and sometimes goes down for 2 weeks in January, but we at least hope to have a much nicer interface and a much easier to use system that will save you and save us time. eventually, if Congress appropriates sufficient funds, we would love to see a new system to build on this, but we're not there yet. So those are some things that come right to mind. I'm sure my team would have many others I'm leaving out, but I would just highlight those for now.
Great. Could you just go back over where folks can find the materials on revenue generating programs?
Yeah, so that is actually not out yet. We're still working on drafting a paper, and when it's up, it'll be on HUD Exchange, and we will also do a listserv announcement and probably a bridge article about it as well. But that right now, that's just work in progress. It's not complete.
All right. And then
although, actually, I'm sorry, if I can go back. On HUD Exchange, one of the nice things about HUD Exchange, it's not just the housing counseling program, it's every program of HUD. And if you type in the search engine something like funding sources for rural programs, you'll actually get a lot of ideas and hits from that other programs have developed. So I wouldn't minimize the content that's on HUD Exchange right now. There's some pretty good stuff there already.
Great. Because you just mentioned the bridge, someone had said that the link they were looking at, the most recent issue was from September 2017, and they wondered if the link had changed or if there was if it lives somewhere new online.
Oh, we'll check that. Thank you. Again, if there's a link on HUD Exchange, but we'll make sure that that's working correct, and we'll check for other links to fix them. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, we have a January issue that came out yesterday. So we deliver in part through the listserv, but we do want to make sure the most recent issue is the one that comes up when you click it. So thanks for telling us that.
All right. Are there any plans to provide more in-depth training on how to administer fee-for-service for housing counseling?
I am not sure, but I will take that as a request, and we will look at that. I know that so there's a couple different kinds of fee-for-service, right? I mean, sometimes that just means charging clients a fee. But another thing it can mean is whether you can earn fees from lenders, for example, on pre-purchase counseling. And that goes back to the issue that Bruce alluded to with the lawsuit being resolved, but some uncertainty around RESPA on that. We are looking at guidance on fee-for-service and hope to have something clarified in the coming year. But we need to work with CFPB on that since they are the ones that regulate RESPA. So more to come. It is an area of uncertainty still, but I am hopeful that it will be clear that counselors can charge fees that can be paid by lenders within both the HUD rules and the RESPA rule.
Great. Somebody asked, will HCO still be able to electronically submit 9902 going forward, or do we have to find a new CMS?
I think that both HCO and Counselor Max have stated publicly that they are looking at alternatives. Fannie Mae is not desiring to keep on supporting HCO indefinitely. I think NeighborWorks has said that Counselor Max needs more investment, and they are considering alternatives as well. Some groups have developed other alternatives or are considering other alternatives. I think that from my seat, and HUD is not directly involved in those decisions. We tend to work with any CMS system that will work with us. But I will say, as the voice of looking at the industry strength, that a robust CMS system or a set of CMS systems that work for counselors and work for clients is essential, and that counseling agencies, I hate to say this, but I have to, may need to consider that they get what they pay for, and that a sustainable CMS system that supports the work and makes the work easier may involve a new system or systems that may have a fee associated with them. So I think that that's an area that we can expect change. but I don't think it'll be rapid or abrupt change where agencies will be left, on a cliff. So to go back to the question exactly, no, I don't think HCO is just going to go away and you're going to be hung out to dry. I think you'll get notice before that happens, and I think you should expect that there will be changes with those two systems in particular.
Great. So just to come back to the question about the FHA connection that folks may already have for reverse mortgage, so that will work. That will suffice to validate the housing counseling certification?
No, I don't think I would say it that way at all. I think you're using the same system, but you need two separate tests to be passed, and you need two separate validations. It happens to be done in one system, but it has to be done two different times for two different purposes.
Okay. Could you?
And I'll ask my team to do more, check our existing FAQs on that, and probably make it more robust. Okay,
thank you. And just a reminder to folks, we're running out of time, and we'll get to as many as we can, but we only have a few minutes left with Sarah. Could you just quickly go over the technological needs that folks will need to take the certification exam, not at a proctored site?
I cannot. I don't have that handy, and I wouldn't be reliable anyway. But I can direct you to the website, HUD-HousingCounselors.com, and it will give you the information about the specifications to take the exam via remote. If you have any questions or that doesn't answer, please send us an email. We can address your specific question, but I don't have that handy.
All right. Can a housing counseling agency include the fees for a CMS in the Supernova voucher?
Fees that they pay for a CMS system are eligible expenses under the HUD Housing Counseling Program as part of their if they receive a grant. It is an eligible expense. The CMS is, there may be a question if they use a CMS for more than one program. They will have to have an allocation methodology. They can only bill for the services that directly benefit the housing counseling program. But yes, they are eligible for reimbursement.
All right. I'm going to make this the last question. It's quite a unique one, but it was one of the first ones asked, so I wanted to get it out. So these folks had a client coming in with a support animal and another client with a pet allergy. Is there any official guidance for how to treat a situation like that? They asked if they should treat it as a disability and request advance notice for accommodation.
That's a really great question, and I would like to do a little research into that. Off the cuff, I think that support animals do tend to require reasonable accommodation, but they can also require notice to the agency to be able to accommodate that accommodation. So I think that let's look around and see if we can come up with some guidance from our colleagues at FHEO here, Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, and we will share that with you. And it's a great question. I'm glad they asked it.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. We're going to let you go, and we'll submit the rest of the questions that we had to you in writing.
Well, we will answer them all. Your questions are incredibly helpful to us. They let us know what you need to hear from us and what you're wondering. So please do keep them coming in. And thank you. And thanks to Bruce and Matthew and all of the members of NHRC for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation with you and for the wonderful work you do. I really appreciate it and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This was very helpful.
Bye.
Good. Thanks, everybody. So just as a quick closeout, just a reminder, think about joining NHRC. If you have any questions, please send me an email personally. I'll be glad to reply. We have a bunch of new members this last year, and really appreciate the support the housing counseling community has shown. Shoot me an email. I'll send you the application, or you can find it on our website. But we really appreciate all the good work you're doing out there, and obviously it strengthens our work as well. About a fifth of our budget comes from membership dues, and that's very, very valuable. We will be back again in 2 weeks, so please join us then. And at this point, we're going to sign off, but thanks for all your good work out there. Thanks. Bye.